Hey, it's Jonathan Stroud here, and I want to welcome you to the podcast. I am super excited to share with you today a recording with Al Worden, an Apollo 15 astronaut who went to the moon. So the year this is published is 2025, but I actually recorded this interview with Al Worden back in 2016. We were in a little coffee shop in San Diego, and I basically got the opportunity to sit down with Al Worden and, ask him some questions about his book and his experience as an Apollo astronaut. And I've been holding on to this recording for a little bit. I did have a blog version back in 2016 where I did publish a little bit of the interview. But as I start this podcast, the goal is to, have conversations with entrepreneurs and, visionaries and other people that are really making an impact in the now new emerging space industry. Now back in 2016, 2017, there were a lot of developments that, hadn't happened, like Starship and other things that, um, you know, have almost the next, like, a decade later have happened. But it was interesting to go back and listen to his perspective on the emerging industry. And at the time, SLS was still the front kind of program and the big rocket everyone was talking about. So during the interview, Al gives his, somewhat controversial opinions on the program and NASA as a whole. And I think it's super interesting, kind of help set the tone for the podcast, what it's about, and just give an interesting perspective for someone that's actually been to the moon. So, with that being said, I won't wait any longer. I'll go ahead and dive into it. Just a couple quick heads up. It is at a coffee shop. I have done my best to clean up the audio, but if you hear a little clanking in the background, we were literally having coffee and a sandwich during our interview. And then also want to give a shout out to Francis French, who actually helped put the interview together, and he actually co-authored a couple books with Al too. So at the end, you do hear him kind of chime in and I think ask a couple questions as well. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the episode, and let's get into it.
Sure, touched on this a little bit in the Earth Rising chapter as far as perspectives. And I know other astronauts have been, whether forward or orbit, talk about the orbital effect and how their perspectives have changed. How did your perspective on life, the universe, and the planet change as a result of your mission to the moon?
Um, Kind of have to go back a little bit. I was probably in the majority of people who didn't really understand the universe and didn't understand where we were in it. And I probably still don't, but I had a view of the universe out there that nobody else has ever seen. There's a portion of the trajectory behind the moon that's shadowed from both the Earth and the Sun. In that portion of the orbit, you see the universe undiminished by an atmosphere, and all of a sudden I saw just light. There's so many stars you can't see an individual star. It's just light, and you can see the mountains of the moon cut off at the top by the light they cut off, and not by anything shining on them. So it's kind of changes your perception of what we're all about. I did a little studying after that, and I come to realize that the Milky Way galaxy that we're in contains something like 400 billion stars. And you realize, you talk to the right people, and you find out that, yeah, there are a couple 100 billion galaxies out there like the Milky Way. And I finally got to asking astronomers, okay, if all that's true, how many universes are there out there? And the answer you get back, if it had been 10 years ago, they would say, no, there aren't any. We're the only one. But now they're saying, we don't really know. So there's a perception of the universe that we live in that is pretty minuscule compared to what the universe, what we see out there, was really like. And the upshot of all that is you come to the conclusion eventually that there are a finite number of planets out there that can sustain life, and of those, there are probably life on some of them. And so that there is intelligent life out there. There's no question about that in my mind. This is a common thread that Carl Sagan used to talk to us about, that there are going to be a certain number of planets with life, and we don't know where they are, but we've got programs here on Earth to search for their radio signals called SETI, and it's still ongoing. So you never know. But the point is, they're probably there. and might be worthwhile for us to find out, except for the fact that if they found us, they'd probably find us pretty basic, like we find animals. I mean, I can imagine a civilization that's a million years advanced on us. Well, I mean, a million years, nothing in universal time. So there are going to be some populations out there that are pretty doggone smart and can do a lot of things we can't do. Which kind of brings me back to my central theme about space, and that is that, in my opinion, the whole space program is a drive that we have that we don't even understand, that forces us to develop those kind of programs and systems that will allow us to go somewhere else when we can't live here anymore. Because I think that's what other intelligent species out there have already done. I don't think we're any different. I don't think we're any different than anything that grows here on Earth, which has prime imperative of survival of the species. And that's what we're all about too. So I see the space program as a little different than a lot of people. I see it as the beginnings of a long-term program. We're talking thousands and thousands of years to develop the capability to take people to the nearest planet that could sustain life. I don't carry that one step further. Yeah, I do believe that the imperative of everything that's alive here on Earth is to survive. That's why grass sends out seed. That's why trees do the same thing. Animals procreate. We do. Interesting analogy with the Indians in the South Pacific. They all started in one place. And when the volcano on their island blew up, they got in their canoes and went to the next island. And that just kind of went throughout all South Pacific. They're probably all part of the same family somewhere back in history. But now they populate the whole South Pacific. I think people in the universe are the same way. They're going to go out and they're going to populate other planets because they can't live on the one that they call home anymore. So it's a little further out than most people that I talk to would like to think. But
what are your thoughts on NASA's current plans with the space launch system, the Orion spacecraft they're developing to send humans to Mars?
I'm not very thrilled by it.
Why not?
First place, the Orion is not the right spacecraft. The Orion is Apollo on steroids. Just a bigger Apollo. Orion has the same L over D as Apollo, which is very low, but 0.27. Come back from Mars to re-enter the atmosphere and not have to do some funny little games. You'd have to have a vehicle that's got an L over D of better than 1. If you had an L over D of 1 on a vehicle, you could come back in the atmosphere and maneuver enough that you wouldn't have to skip out. Orion's going to have to skip out because it's going too fast to stay in the atmosphere. Doesn't have enough lift. So I'm not thrilled with Orion. It's going to be a 4-man spacecraft. So we're going to send 4 guys instead of 3. But we're going to send 4 people on a 1.5-year trip in that thing. Of course, they're going to have some kind of a habitat that'll go with them, like a balloon of some kind. And all that's fine. My only problem is with the Orion. And why did they build the Orion? Why did they do it the way they did? Because, in their opinion, they knew how to do that because they'd already built Apollo. So Orion's just a little bit bigger, and yeah, they could do that. Problem is that none of the people building Orion were there when Apollo was built. So I have a problem with that. If NASA had really been innovative when they came up with this program to go to Mars, we would never see an Orion. We'd see something else. Couple of things. People in NASA are more and more risk averse. They want to build something that they're pretty sure is going to work, even if it doesn't have all the capability they want. They're a little bit afraid of building something that they're not really sure of because maybe the crazy shape of a vehicle that would do the job and not something that they'd be comfortable with. but we're never going to advance unless we make a paradigm shift in what we do. And Orion's not a paradigm shift. It's just a throwback to what we did 50 years ago. That's all it is, in my opinion.
As far as going up the whole paradigm shift, do you think you'll ever see the same kind of excitement, public support that there was during the beginning of the Apollo move on this?
Well, I think we will. I think going to Mars is going to generate the same kind of excitement we had going to the moon. Problem is, a lunar flight's 2 weeks, and you kind of hold people's attention for 2 weeks. How that's going to work for a 1.5-year flight, I don't know. That may be something that's hard to do.
Yeah. So with your astronaut scholarship foundation from the board, 30 years plus with $2 million of scholarships.
Interesting you should ask, because I was just finished up on the strategic plans committee. Foundation will get expanded in certain ways. And that expansion will occur not in scholarships, but in what happens after a student gets a scholarship. We're going to get them much more involved with people like astronauts. We're going to have mentors for these students, somebody already in the business. We're going to have a mechanism to get these students involved in corporations that are supporting the foundation, where those corporations are going to be looking at them as eventual hires. Now, we're going to do a lot of things for students that have nothing to do with scholarship. We're going to try and not only help them move their career along, but enable them to do things that they can't do without our help. We will have access to corporations and with high-level people that could be mentors to them. We already have something like 40 mentors that are working with some of the students right now. We'll probably expand that and get more mentors. We'll have meetings. We're going to have, as an example, starting next year, every year, we will have a big event in Washington at the Air and Space Museum. It's going to be the Neil Armstrong Award. And the Neil Armstrong Award is going to go to the outstanding student of that year. Okay. Along with that, we're going to bring all the students in who are getting scholarships. Instead of us going to them, which we've been doing, we're going to bring them all into Washington to give the scholarship there. Then along with that, we will have technical discussions and all kinds of things for the students while they're there. So we're hoping that we're going to involve the students more and more with what we do, what we are.
Throughout your career, whether it was, before joining the astronaut or after you, and in the book, talk about there's a lot of gotchas you play, whether it's, the fake call from the Pentagon saying that college was selected, or it was, the camping in the road.
Well, that one you mentioned, yeah, we did that. I wasn't in the program then, but
what was your favorite gotcha that you played or had played on you?
Wally Schirra. Absolutely the best gotcha in the world. We did a river cruise on the Mississippi a number of years ago to raise money for the foundation. It was, I think, the Mississippi Queen or something like that. Anyway, we went from New Orleans to Natchez and back. Wally came in about the third day we were on the river. He was going to come in. We had Gordon Cooper and his wife and Scott Carpenter and his wife. Wally was going to come. And then we had a couple of other astronauts there. And I was still the chairman of the committee or of the foundation. So we wanted to work out a little gotcha for Wally coming in. So we got in touch with the guy who ran the hotel on the ship. Very, very nice, big, tall, good-looking guy. Very agreeable to doing something. So here's the way the scenario went down. Wally came on board, and our executive director was with him, and she kept calling us on the radio and telling us where they were. The Coopers and the Carpenters and the Wordens were all in a bathroom. The riverboat has a central aisle, and then all the rooms go off that, and they all have balconies to the outside. So there's a long hall. When you go into a room, there's a long hallway, and the bathroom is right there, and then you get past that, and it opens up into a bedroom. And past that, of course, is an open porch. So we're all sitting in the bathroom, and she brought Wally into the room, and the hotel manager he had worked this thing out where he and his assistant, who was a really great looking girl, were in bed. And he was on top of her. Wally comes in and he looks around and she sees over his shoulder that Wally's there, and she screamed. You could have heard her a mile away. Wally jumped about 3 feet off the ground. And he's standing there, and the hotel manager looks at him and he said, turned around, looks at him, he said, "Oh, you're Wally Schirra, aren't you?" And Wally's saying, by that time he'd recovered his breath a little bit and said, "Oh yeah, I am." And the guy reaches over to the bedside table, picks up Wally's book. And he said, "Here, would you autograph my book for me?" So Wally opens the book, and in the center was a great big sign that says, "Gotcha." That's probably the best. In fact, Wally was great at gotchas. And I actually got an email from him afterwards telling me what a great job that was. He was not one to give credit. No, that little gotcha's kind of gone down in history of it. A great gotcha.
During your return trip around the world, where have you been most excited to meet, and who's left like the biggest impression on you?
Hard to tell. Richard Nixon was very good to us. We took our kids to the White House and had dinner. He grabbed all the kids and gave them a big tour of the White House, which I thought was kind of nice. After that, we spent the weekend at Camp David, and we started our world tour after that. But he was very, very nice to us. He even had his butler go in the wine cellar and get his private stock of scotch so we could have a toast on the back porch, on the south porch. And the butler said, that's your last one of those. He said, "Are you sure you want to use it?" He said, "Yep, bring it up." So we did. So he was kind of good to us. The flip side of that was, and we didn't know this, but the flip side of that was, before we got there, he asked his chief of staff what our names were. So he didn't know us from Adam. But he recognized what it was all about, and he was very good to us. The other one, the other guy that made an impression on me, big impression, was the Pope. I'm not Catholic. Pope Paul the 12th. I think it was the 12th. Little short guy. We got probably 25 of us in the room. We were having a private audience with the Pope. And he was coming down the line, checked everybody's hand. He got to me, started shaking my hand. He wouldn't let go. Shaking my hand, looking at me, shaking my hand, looking at me. Finally, he says, "I think I know you." What'd I do? Well, we figured out finally that he had seen me doing children's television. I did a number of shows with Fred Rogers. Mr. Rogers came with it. Fred was my friend. And we did a show before the flight, and then we did like 8 or 9 or 10 more after the flight. And the Pope had seen one of those. So he saw me on TV, and then he saw me in real, and it clicked in his mind. He said, "Yeah, I think I know you." He was a very, very impressive little guy. I got to say, very impressive. Just the fact that he is the Pope, he's the head of the billions of Christians or Catholics there are in the world. That's a big deal. And I was very impressed. But I'm not Catholic.
So yeah, just to go back to your actual mission to the moon, and there was a few things that went wrong, the need, the glass break and everything. Was there ever a time that you were worried that things were just gonna go completely off course, or so relying on your training, your attitude?
The smallest things are the biggest worry. Like we had a water leak. It was on the fill valve. I'm not worried because this ball of water was getting bigger and bigger. And what do you do with it? And if it gets loose, it gets behind the instrument panel, you got a problem. We did get that resolved rather quickly because they found the guy who had put the water in to begin with. And it turns out he just hadn't cranked the cap down tight enough. So, well, we didn't know. So we had to make sure. But we had to get a tool out of the toolbox, and put it in the top and give it a crank. And I forget, there was a certain amount of pressure or something on it. That was one. The other one we had was, another problem we had was the surface propulsion system engine has two ignition lines. They're redundant lines. There's an A system and a B system. The normal procedure was you go in the computer and you set up a burn, whatever you need to do. And computer's going to give you the attitude and the time of fire and the duration of the fire. And you can run it automatically if you want. So the idea was that you get this all set up, and a minute or so before the actual burn, you turn the two systems on. What happened when we did that was the system fired as soon as I hit the switch. Took the switch straight off. So we started looking. It was in the A system. It was shorted out. So when you hit that switch, the engine's going to fire. So we had to change our procedures where we went through all the automatic stuff, but we only hit the B system. As soon as the engine fired, we turned on the A to make sure. And then before it was programmed to turn off the A and let the B system cut it off. These are kind of workaround procedures that you do. They were complicated, but that could have been kind of serious if we hadn't realized that thing was shorted out.
So during those situations, was there ever time that you were worried?
Not really. Well, especially after we did a test of the system. We verified that, yes, in fact, there was a short in that system. At that point on, I was working. We didn't change anything in the flight as a result of that.
So what caught you most off guard during your mission? Was it the actual taking off? What in the mishaps?
No. It was when we were getting ready to do our first mid-course correction. And that was probably 2 days into the flight. So that's kind of when we found out. We didn't know before that. So we were already 2/3 of the way there when that happened. It's just, what happened is that particular switch on the A side had a solder ball inside the switch that caused the short. Now, when they produce these things, they go through all the quality control checks. They're supposed to do X-rays. They're supposed to do all kinds of things to make sure. But somehow the switch got through all that, and they didn't know. So yeah, we had to be careful.
So, do you have any advice for anyone aspiring to become an astronaut?
Mm-hmm. Well, keep in mind that when they have an application process, for every 1,000 applicants they get, they're probably going to pick one. There's your odds right there. My advice to young people, if they're really serious about being an astronaut, is to study whatever you want, but really do it well. You got to be outstanding in your field. Then you get looked at. I would never suggest that somebody take a certain subject just because they thought it would get them in the astronaut program. Because number one, they'd be studying something they're not really in love with. And number two, it's no guarantee they're going to get in the program anyway. Be silly. You always need to follow a course of study that's going to set you up for your life's work. And then if you're fortunate enough, maybe NASA will call you. That's the way I was. I never expected to go to NASA. Never. That was not something that I focused on. I focused on being the best pilot I could. I already had all the academic stuff. So I focused on being the best pilot. Best test pilot I could be. what I found out was when I got to that point in my life where I was beginning to realize all that, I had all the squares filled that NASA wanted. So I only had an application process, which was a surprise to me. Threw my name in, got in. But I'm saying any student that's wondering what to do with their future, follow their dreams, follow their thoughts, follow what they want to do, and do the best they can at it. And you never know, when you get to the end of the road, other doors will open for you. And that's what I found out with me.
What did you miss when you were? What did you find yourself missing most when you were away from Earth? And then what do you miss most now that you're back on Earth?
On a flight, I can't say I missed anything. You're pretty busy. And when you're not busy, you're thinking about the next things you got to do. So it's either getting prepared to do something and doing it, or cleaning up after doing something and then getting prepared for the next thing. So you don't have a lot of time to think about back home. Today, I don't know. Really, what's the truth? I miss my wife. She wasn't there when I made the flight. I married her after the flight, about 10 years after the flight. But that's, if you were to ask me what do I miss the most today, that'd be it.
One of the most fascinating things I found in the book was your first ever deep space. I think it's still the furthest out.
No. It's the first deep space CVA, not the furthest out.
No, okay.
Because it is the furthest out right now, but it'll be that part will be surpassed. Being the furthest out will be surpassed someday.
So I found it
when we go to Mars.
Of course. So I found it fascinating. You could look in one direction and see Earth, and then the other, just turn the head, see Earth. So I don't know what was going through your mind during that time, or it's just.
Like I thought, wow, nobody's ever seen this. I'm the first one that's been able to see this. Funny part was that I would love to have had a camera out there to capture some of that. And they wouldn't let me take a camera because they couldn't see any reason for it. Well, we found all kinds of reasons for it afterwards. So I think 16 and 17 were allowed to carry cameras. I had to go get Pierre Mion to paint the picture. Ed Hengbold also did a great picture. I love his picture that he painted. But those are all paintings of what I did. You've seen the one picture. I mean, big deal, right? I've always considered that to be a conspiracy. that David and Jim worked that out. They took lots and lots of pictures of each other down on the surface. And that's the only one they got on my EDA. I think, well, okay. You guys planned it that way.
So I don't know if, Francis, you have any questions?
I think these are great questions, great answers. I mean, the only other thing, you kind of touched on your first question, I think, which is the things that the guys who flew around the moon solo got, because all the attention's on the moonwalkers, and yet with your first question, you got a really good answer from Al of something that those guys never got, which is being alone on the far side of the moon, looking out at the universe. And the only other thing I think that would be kind of germane to that would just be like, what, the underrated command module pilots compared to the overrated, in some ways, moonwalkers. Apparently.
Well, I agree, and I think there's a thing about those who walk on the moon and those who stay in orbit around it. In the professional business of being an astronaut, the shortest path to being a commander is to be a command module pilot. Lunar module pilots don't normally get to be commanders. Now, there was a political push on 17 to put Gene Cernan in as a commander. That's an abnormal situation. All the other commanders were command module pilots first. So that's from the standpoint of the professional side of the business, is that if you want to become a commander somewhere down the road, you try and be a command module pilot first. The funny part is that I never asked to be a command module pilot. What happened was that when we had the fire at the Cape in 67, they had to develop an engineering team to rebuild that thing. And they put me on that team because of my engineering background. And I'm kind of a practical engineer too. I think engineering is a thing that, you always look for the simplest way to do things. Don't make them complicated. Do the simplest thing. And so I think for a lot of reasons like that, I got put on that task force. But what resulted in that was that I knew more about Jack Swigert, and I knew more about the command module than anybody in the program when we finished that. He ended up flying on 13, and I ended up flying on 15. So I didn't really ask to be the command module pilot, but I recognized that that was professionally shortest route to being a commander. Lunar module pilots never fly anything. They're along for the ride. They're passengers. They are what we'll call systems engineers. They look at the instruments and they look over the shoulder of the guy who's doing a dynamic flight and all that. But they don't really fly anything. So if you come to a point in your career where they say, okay, you're going to be a commander, then if you came up through as an LMP, you got to learn 2 spacecraft. If you come up as a CMP, you only have to learn 1. Big difference. We make a lot of, we have a lot of publicity about the guys who walk on the moon, and that's fine with me. I don't care. It's just that people don't understand that there's a commander who does all the work, and then there's an LMP who just goes along for the ride, and he gets to walk on the moon, and he becomes a very important person because of the media. But the media never understood what the program was all about either. So they focus on the guys with all the pictures. And the other thing is, on the surface, they got a video camera, they got Hasselblads, they got all kinds of cameras, and they're taking lots of pictures of each other. And there's constant video feed back to mission control what they're doing. So everybody in the world knows who's on the moon walking around. You have never seen a video of a guy in orbit. Never. Why? There's no camera there. I wouldn't have done it anyway because I don't care. But that was the thing. You never hear about CMPs, even though they are almost co-equal with the commander in terms of flying the machines. And the lunar module pilot sitting there is just looking at how much oxygen do we have left, kind of thing. Huge difference. So I don't begrudge that at all. I think that was great.
I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add or phrases on do you think there's any hurdles in our way that you think currently getting to Mars?
I think we're going to have someone do a John F. Kennedy speech to get the people in this country off their butts and supporting a program, because right now we've got too many people on welfare, and they'd rather the money go to them than to go into the space program. And what people do not understand about space program is that the primary product of the space program is not going somewhere. It's developing the technology to go there. That's what's made our commercial enterprises in this country so successful over the last 40 years. We developed silicon chips back in the 50s to do solid state devices, right? And we were a beneficiary of that in the space program. You cannot touch anything today that doesn't have solid state technology. It has silicon chip. Now we're down into things small. We're down into things that are an order of magnitude smaller than silicon chips. And the next wave of that's going to be an order of magnitude smaller than that. We're going to have things that are down to the atomic level doing switching in devices like this. It's going to be that way. But that's the technology that needs to be developed if we are truly going to be successful at going to Mars and going beyond Mars. So I think there's not a good understanding, particularly by the liberals in this country, that the technology that gets developed to do a program like space program results in a paradigm change in the technology in this country that is used by commercial companies to make products like flat panel displays, cell phones, computers. I mean, I could name you 1,000 things. All of those are a result of the development of the silicon chip. Okay? It's made this country very successful. Now other countries are catching up. We still have the opportunity to go to the next step in technology. Well, it's going to cost money. And we're going to use that technology to go to Mars, I believe. Now, Mars is already kind of built. We're already doing the silicon chip, the solid state stuff. But in my mind, the technology that gets developed to make the kind of trips we got to make is what's so important in the program. And that can make this country very successful again. But we got to have somebody, very strong leader, get up and say, okay, I will dedicate this country, putting a man on Mars in 10 years and bringing them back safely. And here's how we're going to do it. Here's the money it's going to take. And the money's going to come from here and here and here, just like Kennedy did. He absolutely set this country on its ear when he did that. Everybody was behind him. But we need a really good, charismatic, strong leader. Let's start that. Let's see if we got one.
Yes. Like I said, thank you again for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure.
I really thanks.
All right, and that wraps up the interview with Al Worden. I hope you enjoyed. I'm super, again, thankful and that I got the experience to actually sit down and have a conversation with Al Worden. I hope you enjoyed it, and I think there were some super interesting takeaways. Not only his perspective on space, the program overall of NASA, and the direction it was going in back in 2016. And it's interesting to see how it's kind of unfolding now, almost a decade later since the interview. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this, secret, never before released episode. If you did, go ahead and I guess like, follow, and subscribe. And I, promise to bring you more interesting conversations with founders, operators, investors, and others, shakers and movers in the space sector. That sounds like something you're interested in. Go ahead and look out for the next episodes. Thanks.